Good afternoon, everyone, from the Safe Routes to School team. My name is Diane Hansen, and I am the Program Director for Safe Routes here in Massachusetts. Welcome to our webinar on equity in transportation. Just some housekeeping here and a few webinar tips. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website in February. You do not need to call in. You should be able to hear everything through your computer audio. If you do call in, we will get some echoing and feedback, and we'll just have to mute your line. During Q&A, if you want to ask a question, make sure to unmute your line or post your question in the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat box. If anyone's having connectivity issues, we do have somebody here to help address that as well. So I'll leave this slide on for a few seconds so you can take a look and see where all of your controls are at the bottom of the Teams screen. Okay. Our main speaker today is from one of our partners, Urban Trans North America. Johnny Rotherham has made his professional purpose to improve the lives of cyclists and pedestrians in communities around the world. This initially involved helping deliver major projects in the UK, such as Bikeability, a cycle training program that led to over 1 million children learning to ride their bike. In 2012, Johnny brought his expertise and knowledge stateside when he moved to Denver, Colorado. Johnny is an award-winning member of the American Planning Association and an active member of the Association for Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. Johnny's been invited to speak at numerous national and international conferences and published papers on the subject of bicycle planning. So we're really excited to have Johnny helping us out here today. Covering some of our program slides is Emily Bazinkwitz. She is our Safe Routes to School Outreach Supervisor. Since 2014, Emily has served in every one of the Safe Routes Outreach territories, giving her invaluable experience and deep knowledge of our partner network and the variety of strategies needed to equitably and creatively implement our programs and affect change in the Commonwealth. Emily is pursuing a master's in urban and regional planning at Northeastern University, and we're happy to have Emily speaking today. Our third speaker is Vivian Ortiz. She joined the Safe Routes to School program in 2018 as an outreach coordinator. She holds a Master's of Public Administration from Baruch College City University of New York and National Urban Fellows Program in New York City. Vivian is an avid champion for active transportation and applies this passion to her outreach work with schools, stakeholders, and champions in the Boston Metro Outreach Territory. She has not owned a car since 2007, and she learned how to ride a bike about 5 years ago and continues to choose biking as her primary form of transportation. Welcome to our speakers. Johnny, I will pass this along to you now for a review of the agenda.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone, and good afternoon. So our agenda today, we'll be going through a few things. First of all, trying to unpack what we mean by equity in transportation, why this is an issue for schools, how to identify equity needs in your community, and then finally, how can we rebalance our transportation systems based on what we've heard throughout this presentation. So what do we mean by equity in transportation? At its base, equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. And to achieve this equitable outcome, we need to reflect a commitment to and understanding of equity through our programs. And this leads to the program needing to include a process that explicitly addresses equity. And this all kind of comes together to meaning to be intentional in our approach to identifying populations that need our extra support. This is just a quick kind of snapshot of one of the stark example of equity in the US. This was a study undertaken in 2016, which found that the lowest earning 20% of the US population spent an average of about 30% of their income on transportation costs. And as you can see by those graphs, the higher earners spend a much lower proportion of their income on transportation. The graph just to the right of that is relative transportation expenditure to income in the EU, and it can just kind of starkly shows you the difference between the two areas in terms of transportation equity and income. The Safe Routes to School program also has equity indicators, and these are based off the US Census data from 2010. And this chart just shows how representative the Safe Routes to School partner schools are to the census. And as you can see, it's very reflective of the census in Massachusetts. I'm now going to talk a little bit about how equity has been addressed in the 2019 state state and bicycle pedestrian plans. And this kind of just broadens our presentation to include a new theme, which is environmental justice. And this term describes communities that may include concentrations of minority populations, such as those that are low income and groups with limited English proficiency. Environmental justice neighborhoods often have had historic disinvestment in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and therefore often have an outweighed number of bicycle and pedestrian accidents and fatalities. For example, while minority groups make up about 35% of the national population, they often suffer 46% of pedestrian deaths. Similarly, fatality rates are 23 to 30% higher for Hispanic and African American bicyclists than for white bicyclists. So you can see here that there is a real difference between the environmental justice areas and other areas when it comes to safety. This is a screenshot of the environmental justice map viewer, which is available on Mass.gov's website, and you can go and access that whenever you'd like for free. How is equity being addressed in the plans? This is from the bicycle state plan. And as you can see, for every goal that is included within that plan, there is also an equity check. So every time a goal is created, the plan looks at equity to make sure that it is meeting any particular equity needs. This is the pedestrian state plan, and again, it's a very similar situation where you have the goals and then you have the equity check to make sure that we are considering equity with every single goal. So that's kind of a brief overview of equity in transportation and in Massachusetts. So now we're going to go on to why this is an issue for schools. The first one is safety issues. The most vulnerable people who use the transportation network are often those people that walk or ride their bike, and they generally have the least dedicated infrastructure. Many parents cite safety as the main reason why they do not allow their child to bike or walk to school, and so they drive. And so we have this catch-22 situation where the roads are too unsafe because of speeding or traffic volumes or lack of infrastructure. And so that increases the amount of traffic on the roads, resulting in it being more unsafe. Parent traffic comprises 10% of today's commuter traffic. So it is a significant amount of traffic that is induced. Similarly, environmental justice communities may not even have access to a car, and so really providing access to transit, cycling, and walking is a much more equitable way of improving access to schools. Health issues. People living in environmental justice communities often have higher instances of diabetes, asthma, and other illnesses. And this can be a case of the air quality being not good enough, and reducing driving trips can improve air quality. Encouraging walking and cycling can also have positive impacts on health. For example, studies have shown that pupils that bike or walk or use other active transportation to access schools actually have higher attainment. This can also active transportation using active transportation every day can also reduce the rate of multiple diseases later on in life. Focusing now more on air pollution, the BBC over in the UK did a study on air pollution and access to schools, and Diane will put this link into the chat box so you can see the video. But essentially, they gave a sensor to people accessing, students and parents accessing schools in the UK, and used the sensor to monitor particulate matter 2.5 for everyone that was walking, cycling, and driving. And the results were very interesting. It showed that people who drove to school to drop their kids off actually had higher exposure to particulate matter than those who walked or biked. And this is very important because air pollution especially impacts children's lungs that are still developing. So it is a more significant issue than for adults. And as you can see here, that improving biking and walking reduces that the exposure to particulate matter. Access issues. The school day begins when students leave their front doors and get to school. However they, whatever mode they use and however they try to access the school, it needs to be safe and it needs to be reliable. Often, school access infrastructure is inherently designed to be easiest and most efficient for driving and dropping off students. And this can create conflicts for those that are trying to access by walking and cycling. And if you have increased congestion through driving, that can also create conflict. The terms drop off and pick off are very car centric, and therefore we prefer to use the terms arrival and dismissal to cover all modes. Oftentimes, a car will carry just one student and will take up a lot more space than someone who is walking or cycling. And similarly, drivers therefore have a disproportionate amount of dedicated right-of-way space when accessing schools. As you can see by this image in the corner, a whole system of how to access and drop off kids was created in this instance. Every parent, student, and staff member, regardless of the mode they choose to access school, has the right to safe access and dedicated infrastructure.
Well, it doesn't matter, wherever we can find, yes. Laura is coming too.
Sorry, I think, could we mute? Thanks. Timing issues. Parents that may need to work more or one jobs may find it difficult to pick up and drop off a child by non-driving modes. And this is especially true when transit scheduling is considered. Oftentimes, transit is not scheduled for the end of the school day or potentially the end of a after school activity. And so parents who may not own a car may find it difficult to use transit to access the school and pick up and drop off. In Fitchburg, Massachusetts, they created a high school route. So it actually aligned specifically with sports and school dismissal. And this really helped and provided a true alternative to people who did not have a car to access the school. Now I'm going to briefly talk about new mobility devices and how and whether this is an issue or an opportunity for equity. I'm sure you're all aware of the new mobility devices that are suddenly kind of thrown on our streets, and you see more and more people using them to access work and school. And so we just wanted to make sure that we address this issue. The first item is safety and training. Typically, we recommend if you would wear a helmet cycling, then you should also wear a helmet using a scooter or using an electric bike or other device. The next one is speed. These devices often go faster than a bicycle and faster than walking. And so we need to consider how this increased speed can lead to unsafe conditions whether it be for the participant using the device or for others around them. Charging will become a more important issue. All of these devices have some form of battery within them, and if a child uses one to access school, we would need that battery may need to be charged so that they can get home. And so making sure that we are well aware of charging facilities and if that can be improved at schools is something to consider. Policy is the next one. Policies for these new devices can really vary depending on the city or the jurisdiction. So we would recommend reaching out to your local MPO to see what the various policies and laws are for using these new mobility devices. This is a quick chart just showing the categories of micromobility devices. As you can see, there are a lot of different types that are available, but generally all of them have the same three aspects. That is that they are powered in some way. That may be a battery or even solar powered. They are all lower speed, so they all typically are around 20 to 25 miles per hour. And they are all generally smaller devices. And this chart, you can see there's a link there to it, and it just gives you a good overview of the types that are available and the different classes that exist. This is just a quick snapshot of all of the different types that are currently available. You have folding e-bikes, you have folding scooters, you have the hoverboards, and you have the longboards that can be controlled with smartphones. So there's really a wide range of these devices coming on the market, and more are being added every month. So we need to make sure that we are aware of them and catering and looking out for them through our schools. So how can they help with equity? First of all, they do promote modes that increase physical activity. So in some respect, a lot of these are assist. So there is some amount of physicality that you need to use to access a school using these modes when compared to driving. They do improve sustainability in the urban transportation system. They are low powered, they are low polluting, and they are a little bit faster, so they are a good option. They really do expand the options available to people and expand the range at which people can get to using these new low-powered devices. However, there are the downsides to these devices. They may undercut safety. Oftentimes, these devices are used on sidewalks, and so they can reduce the safety of fellow pedestrians or people in wheelchairs that are also using the same infrastructure. They are generally not ADA accessible, and so that is a barrier. And generally, they may be only available in higher income areas, and that's particularly true for shared mobility devices. So that's a quick overview of the issues and how they pertain to schools. I'm now going to move on to how to identify needs within your community. So this will be a quick look at this. So we're going to think about how you can gather the key data, how you can identify your audiences, and that all leads to pursuing an understanding. So gathering key data. The first thing we can do is conduct surveys of parents and guardians, and this will provide us with information such as the shift and work hours, arrival and dismissal times, and the modes that people are currently using to access schools. We can use this survey data to then map home locations and see if there are concentrations of different modes around the school. And this can really help us to understand how and where infrastructure is needed to improve access to school. The Safe Routes to School program has a number of resources through MassDOT that can be used. And I'm now going to hand over to Emily to talk through some of the survey tools that are available.
Hello. So one of the many resources that we have available is our Safe Routes to School parent travel surveys. Our parent and guardian travel surveys are available for any partner school Our survey provides incentives for schools that have a 50% participation rate from the parents and guardians that are filling it out. What's really cool about our survey is it is available in 9 different languages. It can be done online or in a paper format. And if you do get the 50%, we give out $250 worth of incentives, including bike lights, pedometers, reflective backpacks, etc. If you look to the right of this slide, you can see this is what the online version of the survey looks like. So we don't ask any identifying information about the student. We just ask what grade the child is in, how they get to school, how they leave from school, as well as how many vehicles are in the household. So another great program that we have is we do offer both walk and bicycle assessments, arrival, dismissal, observations. All of this is available free of charge for any Safer School partner. So on this slide, this is a little bit of an excerpt of what our parent survey report looks like, some of the good information that you get. So here's a snapshot from a recent survey that we conducted. It shows the estimated travel modes based on the number of survey participants. It also shows what the expected amount of walkers and bikers should be based on the survey data from all Massachusetts surveys conducted over the last 5 years. In this example, the actual walk and bike is 75% of students, where the expected is 62%. Therefore, this school is exceeding expectations for walkers and bikers within a half a mile of the school. So this is a snapshot also from the survey report, and it shows the walk shed as well as the bike shed, and includes the origin of students in relation to the school. So if you look at the big red dot in the middle, that is the school itself, and the blue dots are all the walkers, and the orange red dots are family vehicles, yellow are school buses, green are bike, etc. And each color represents a different walker bike shed. So as you can see, the walkers are pretty clustered in one area, and when we are looking at helping to establish walking or biking routes, this is often one of the first places we look, is where do the existing walkers exist, and is there any potential to increase that?
Thanks, Emily. I am going to pass this back to Johnny. Johnny, go ahead and take control. Great, thank you.
Thank you. And so we're going to move on to our next phase, which is identification of your audiences. And this is looking at identifying the members of environmental justice neighborhoods within your community. What we want to do here is recognize those people who may be struggling with an unsafe or overly expensive trip to or from school. And that is regardless of whether that is in a rural or urban area. And the aim here is to identify those people that are struggling and to make sure that we have the programs and the infrastructure in place to allow them to access schools with dignity, regardless of their income and regardless of their mode of choice. This leads to pursuing an understanding, and this is really critical to really delving into the issues or the concerns within your community. First of all is to harness curiosity, to really think about how we can get involved and get into the shoes of those people that are struggling to access schools. This will really help us to build empathy with that person, to understand all of the barriers that they have to accessing schools. And this can lead to a few things that we can use to get into their shoes. One really useful thing is to conduct one-on-one interviews or discussion groups, and that can really help tease out the concerns and the issues that people have. Another one is to actually try out their trip. So go to the community that they're coming from and see how easy it is to access the school through walking, cycling, or taking transit, and make a photo or video montage of that trip. And that would be a really useful tool to really understand the barriers that people are coming across when trying to access schools. Finally, ensure their voice is included in survey results. Oftentimes, it is most difficult to get responses from people within the environmental justice communities. And so making sure that we are paying attention to that and really trying our best to get voices included in the results. So what now? We've gathered the data, we've identified our audiences, our members of the environmental justice communities, and we pursued an understanding. We now have a great amount of information that we can share with leadership and key organizations to advocate for the vulnerable populations within your community. And this combination of both the quantitative, where we've used the survey and mapped out where people are coming from, and the qualitative, where we're holding interviews and we're doing focus groups, to paint a really clear picture of the issues and barriers to people accessing schools. Community members and key data and stories that no one else has will now be what you have. So you will be able to identify the costs of transportation and those difficulties. We can combine all this to build better programs and to target where infrastructure needs are required in the future. So now moving on to the tools we can use to rebalance our transportation systems. And I'm going to talk about a few different things. We have incentives, policies, our community, infrastructure, safe routes to school training, and language and interpretation. So the first one, incentives. Incentives can really help level the playing field. There are a few examples here. For example, bike maintenance classes and bike giveaways are a really great way to provide bicycles and provide training to pupils who may not be able to afford a bike or may not have access to maintenance classes. And there are a few active within the Massachusetts area who will come to the school and provide those classes and those bike giveaways. Next one, free or discounted after-school childcare is really a very powerful tool to provide for parents who are working multiple jobs or working shift jobs where it may be very difficult for them to come to pick up their pupils after school. So really considering whether that can be made free or discounted widens the number of people that could access it. Promoting commuter tax benefits at schools is also important and can be more aimed at faculty and staff. So making sure that we're not only considering parents and students, but also the staff, and making sure that we have commuter tax benefits available for everyone. And finally, we could remove or reduce school bus fees, which may be a barrier to some parents. Policies. One of the things we could do is develop a municipal transportation equity program. And the city of Seattle has very recently adopted an equity program as of last year. And so it's becoming an increasingly important area where people want to get involved in. Connect with your local bike and pedestrian groups or task forces, and this will give you a good idea of the types of policies that they're pursuing or want to lobby for, and gives you a good understanding of what advocates are thinking about. Re-examine all municipal transportation policies and look for ways to include equity. And this is especially important and something that you can consult your MPO, your Metropolitan Planning Organization, for guidance in those areas. And utilize mass.gov, which has interactive mapping and other resources to help you identify environmental justice communities. I'm now going to hand over to Vivian to talk about community.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to to talk to you about how we work with community and making sure that we're making those communities in the environmental justice areas part of our program, and either within the Safe Routes to School program or also just transportation officials, and when you're coming into neighborhoods and talking about improvements and just some of the observations that I've had. First of all, I want to mention that the Massachusetts Safe Routes to School, our program currently works with 83% of all of the environmental justice communities in Massachusetts, okay? So I'm going to now switch back to, as a person in the community, and some of the experiences that I have encountered, and maybe just to give some tips. I am not a transportation professional, so I've had to learn a lot of these things, and I ask a lot of questions. So do your homework. If it's an area that you've never been to and you don't have any kind of relationship with, come in, find out who's there, talk to your elected officials, talk to their staff people to find out who can I partner with, who are the folks in this community that we might be able to come in and have them work with us on this, because we want to come in and make improvements in the community, but we don't want to continue coming in and doing these things without making sure that the community is aware of it, has an opportunity to give input, and also is familiar with the language and everything that we're talking about. So community-based organizations, grassroots organizations, again, speaking to elected officials, that's something that I have actually experienced when a community is coming in to do something in the area where I live. Sometimes they'll get in touch with my city councilor, and sometimes they'll say, hey, get in touch with her because she does a lot of things with active transportation because she rides a bike, doesn't own a car anymore, and maybe she might be a person that might be able to help you kind of get organized in the process. But there are groups like Shape Up Somerville. In Mattapan, we have the Food and Fitness Coalition, Walk Bike Springfield. These are folks that are already working with active transportation and healthier lifestyles. So make sure that you're finding out who they are. Do a Google search, something. Find out go to the health center in that community. Find out, what are the best ways? How is it that you guys organize with people in the neighborhood? Find out when those meetings are taking place. Try not to schedule these meetings at the same time that another meeting may take place in the neighborhood. We've been really lucky that the city of Boston, usually when they're coming in to do something, they want to know when are we already having these meetings and making sure that they're not picking those dates. And then go to churches, synagogues, mosques. Make sure that you're talking to people that are in the community and say, we're having this. We want to make sure that the community is involved. We want to hear from you. We want you to be involved. And then also, make sure that the first time that you come to the community is not the day that you're coming for the meeting. Ride your bike there, take the train, take the bus. Riding your bicycle in a neighborhood where you're trying to increase biking that currently does not have any kind of bike facilities, you need to have experienced it in order to be able to empathize and understand why it is that folks might resist having some of these facilities come in, or how it is that those folks that are there that are riding already, what it is that they're having to experience. Realize that environmental justice communities, they don't trust outsiders, okay? It's been years of disinvestment, and they're wondering why were you so interested in us now? When you're starting out at the meeting or the process, ask folks in the room, because some folks may be familiar with this. They may have already been involved in some transportation planning or any type of changes that have taken place in their neighborhoods, and some folks have absolutely no idea what this means. So we can't have cookie cutter meetings. We can't just come in because this is the way we've done it in other neighborhoods. This is the way we do our meetings. It may take a little bit more time, so make sure that you're scheduling additional time in the process. If you have deadlines that have to be met because of whatever it is that needs to happen, take into account that these meetings you may require a little bit more time with these neighbors to explain things. So if you're in a meeting and you ask, have you ever attended a meeting that has anything to do with transportation, and only 3 of the people in the room out of 40 respond, then we need to change the plan. Come in already prepared for the fact that that might happen, okay? Make sure that we've got materials to be able to cover everyone that's in the room. Anticipate, a larger group. Make sure that we have enough of the supplies. And if we don't, or whatever may happen, let's make sure that we're gathering information as to how to be able to get in touch with these folks. Email may be a way to do that. It might not be. You may need to mail some copies over and leave some over like in the health center or something like that. you have to be creative and be ready to change up the plan as to how it is that you do it in other neighborhoods. Let's go ahead and assume that the folks that are in the room have never gone to a transportation-related meeting. Make sure that if you are bringing up new terms, folks don't know what a flex post is. They don't know what an LPI, lead pedestrian interval is when it comes to the lights. Put together a glossary, because oftentimes I've been in meetings when folks are just going through this very quickly. Look at the audience. If you're getting blank stares, that means they're not able to follow you. Every once in a while, ask, say, does anybody have any questions? But check yourself. Realize that this is terminology that you use on a regular basis, but folks haven't heard these. So bringing a glossary, I think, is a great way to have folks be excited, and that way they can be prepared for the next time around. Have them go around to different areas and find a picture, take a picture of a flex poster, things like that, because folks have seen these things, they just don't know what they're called and don't know how to identify them in the same terms that we're using. And instead of saying traffic calming measures, just say, we're here because we want to slow down traffic. We've heard from you in the neighborhood that this is a problem and we want to work with you. So use terms that you would use before you were a transportation engineer, all right? Also, making sure that we have the materials in multiple languages. Know the languages of the communities that you're going in to visit. If it's in a school, definitely the administration can give that to you. This is information that you can find looking at the census tract, talking to people in the community. So making sure that you have information already, if it's printed information already available in different languages, interpreters are available. That may be very costly for you to come in with an interpreter to begin with, but keep in touch. Know if you need to have one beforehand, all right? Even sometimes we've used interpreters or just folks that speak the language in our community and have them sit with other folks because they already are more familiar with the process, and they can just sit in a little small group and then know for the next time, come prepared and have interpreters there. Also, transportation and meeting times, making sure that folks have access to public transportation, knowing when the commuter rail is going to arrive in that neighborhood and making sure that your meeting coincides with that. If the commuter rail doesn't stop in that area until 6:15, why are we scheduling the meeting to start at 6? Okay, 6 o'clock is a wonderful time for retirees. It doesn't work for everyone in the community, so figure that out. Ask some folks. Generally, what time is it that you have meetings in your neighborhood? What do we do about childcare? Do we need to bring any snacks? Anything like that that's going to have people be involved and actually come to the meetings and be involved. All right. Another thing is a 2-hour meeting about a subject matter that folks are unfamiliar with is way, way, way too long. When you're doing that intro meeting, let's keep it short. Let folks know we're going to be following up. We wanted to keep this short because we know this is information that might be new to you. We didn't want to overwhelm you with this, so we wanted just to kind of give you the basics, and then maybe the other meetings may run a little bit longer. And then breaking out into smaller groups during the meetings just to check in to make sure that folks are following along is probably another idea to do too. People are really embarrassed when they're not familiar with the subject to get up and say, ask a question or make a comment because they're thinking I'm the only person that doesn't understand that. So making sure from the beginning of the meeting, check in with your audience, ask them, are you familiar with this? Please, invite them to ask questions during the meeting and say, can we back up? Can you define that a little bit better? And again, having that glossary for folks to be able to become more familiar is very helpful in making sure that we provide information in different languages. So thank you.
Thanks, Vivian. I can guarantee you that if Vivian is in one of your community meetings, she will stop and ask questions and ask you to clarify. And I think that's so important, even having somebody from your office be that person and make sure you're checking for understanding. So thank you, Vivian. Vivian's very passionate about this, and she helps us all with a lot of our community engagement. So I'm going to pass this back to Johnny to continue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vivian.
So I'm going to quickly talk about infrastructure. And we're in this part, we're looking at school access, complete streets, and speed reduction. First of all, school access. When we're planning for new schools, our goal should be separate modes of transportation. And this can really improve access for people walking and cycling and driving so that they have a clear way that they should be accessing the school. The front door should be used for people walking, cycling, bus riders, and those that are handicapped and emergency vehicle access. The secondary location should be used for driven students. So we want to make it as easy as possible for those using sustainable modes to access the school and convenient for them to get there. When we're considering signage, we really need to look at MUTCD signage because that is the only signage that is enforceable by the police. Also, we want to look at designing customized arrival and dismissal plans that include map, text, and school hours. And as Emily suggested earlier, the Safe Routes to School team can help with the creation of these plans. So I'm just going to show a couple of examples. This is O'Malley Middle School, and as you can see, they have the crosswalks marked, they have the pickup and drop-off areas, the circulation, and really it's very clear how you access by walking and cycling, using the front doors for walkers and bikers, and then a secondary area for people who are picking up and dropping off using a private vehicle.
Johnny, can I interrupt you for a second? We actually, Judy, whose school this is, Judy, our outreach coordinator, she is on the line and she can also speak specifically to this arrival dismissal plan and how that came about. Judy, I think I just unmuted you if you wanted to say a few words about this.
Terrific. Thank you, Johnny and Diane. So as you mentioned, the goal here was to separate modes of transportation. The O'Malley School was already actually doing a good job of this. They have good infrastructure, but what they didn't have was signage. So without a communication plan, which signage is part of, people were just doing what they wanted to do. It's almost as though rules didn't apply to everyone. But you have to ask yourself, what are the rules? So what we went ahead and did with the O'Malley School is that we developed this map as a mode of communication and to fully identify the separation of the different types of modal transportation. A little different, though, is that we gave a totally separate area for the cars, for the family vehicles. That would be the parking lot. They're very fortunate enough to have an open parking lot to one side of the school campus. And so we modified that. So they also have changed quite a bit about their signage, and we've done a lot with education. One point of education was when we developed their arrival dismissal plan, and the slide you're actually looking at is a part of that 2 pieces of paper, if you would. So again, it includes this map with the legend, but on the flip side, it would have these walking points you see on the left, but it also included the bell schedule with school hours. So people were, there's no discretion about when you were to arrive and depart school with your student. These would be located on the school website. We recommend principals include these in their school newsletters, preferably in the summer mailing, and then usually in the winter as a reminder, and also in the school handbook, which is required for all Massachusetts schools. About 52% of the school populations would live within a mile of the school. So again, trying to get more kids to walk and bike, looking at those mitigation points, the conflict points between pedestrian bikes and the buses with the family vehicles, and just giving different ideas for how to lessen the traffic congestion around the school property for those who need to drive.
Thank you, Judy. And I do want to point out that this is also another place where you can have this translated into the language that is appropriate to the parents and guardians that are sending their children to school there. So that's another equity check, is to make sure you have these arrival dismissal plans translated into the language that's most appropriate for the area. And Johnny, back to you.
Thanks. So this is another example of a map. This is Manchester Memorial School. And this has a slightly different aspect to it, where there are park and walk locations. And this is another way in which we can encourage physical activity by encouraging parents to park outside of the school premises and then to actually walk their kids into the school. Again, it's another way of how we can reduce congestion at the school while also increasing active transportation. Next, this is just a quick overview. This is the Complete Streets program by MassDOT, and this is just a few examples. The MassDOT program is available throughout Massachusetts, and as you can see, can really change the way a roadway feels, improve connections, improve crossings, and really make it more accessible for people who are walking and cycling within communities. Speed reduction. Speed reduction is one of the most effective methods to improve transportation safety. And many of you may be aware, but the 20's Plenty campaign is a global campaign that aims to reduce limits in residential areas to 20 miles an hour. For example, a part of the Vision Zero plan, the city of Cambridge has recently adopted 20's Plenty on many of their streets as of last year. There's a wide consensus from global health, safety, and economic forums that say 20's Plenty is best practice and can really lead to reducing fatalities and collisions on our roadways, and really improve the environment for people cycling and walking. Next, language interpretation and accessibility. And as Vivian kind of was talking about using your language, we also need to consider the different translations that we may need to make available depending on our communities. So providing the translation and interpretation should be made available where possible. All websites and online materials should be made to meet common accessibility standards. And programs such as Adobe Acrobat actually include a free accessibility checker so that you can see if a document will be available for people who are hard of hearing or maybe have sight impairments. The Safe Routes to School team can help with translation and interpretation services, and so reach out if those are needed in your community. I'm now going to hand over to Emily to talk about Safe Routes to School training.
Hello. So one of the things that we have done the past couple of years with our outreach team is we have led a training on including students of all abilities in our Safe Routes to School programming. So this is a very important mission of ours. It is important that every child, regardless of ability, has the option to get to school how they would like. So what we did was we worked with some partners throughout Massachusetts to create this training, and we conducted a walk audit to look at what the infrastructure barriers would be for a person with disabilities, as well as ways that we can work with school special education departments to include students with all abilities in our trainings, as well as how to talk to teachers in schools to make sure that these kids are included. Every outreach coordinator on our team has led a training that has included students of all abilities, and it is really a great way to not only include them, but to have them teach their peers about maybe some of the barriers that they experience, and it creates better understanding throughout all the different kids.
Thank you, Emily. So that is the conclusion of our presentation, and I do know that Leon has been fielding some of the questions in our chat window, and I think that some of the folks were replying back to and saying we'll get back to them with certain questions. I think it was Vivian who said she's not a transportation planner, so most of our Safe Routes to School outreach coordinators, we are on the outreach side. And so if you have technical questions about speeds or transportation planning or legislation, things like that, we will research the question and we will get back to you and we'll let you know. But we can, would love to answer any questions right now. And if you can either put it in the chat window, and Leon, let me know if we have anything else that came up, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask a question. Okay, so I am going to go back to the presentation while Leon brings that up. Leon, anything in there? Or if anyone wants to, again, unmute themselves. Okay, Charlotte, can you explain how exposure to air pollutants is higher when driving versus walking or biking? So the video link that Leon posted in the chat window a little bit earlier, that's actually, it was a small little study done by the BBC in Yorkshire, I think, in a town called Sheffield. And if you watch the video, it's about 1.5 minutes long. And they basically took 3 different families, all traveling to school, 3 different modes. And they had air pollution monitors on, one inside the car, one on the bike, and one with walking. And they measured the air pollution, and then they showed the results from that. So by no means was it a statistically significant study, but it was really interesting and sort of food for thought. And if you watch it, it probably has a few more points in there that I'm not making, but it does have some really interesting information in there. So hopefully that helps, and you can watch the video. Next question, does MassDOT have adaptive bikes available that we can use for bike training sessions? So I would have to check with the MassDOT bike ped coordinator, Pete, to see if that's available. I don't think it is. However, there are several organizations within Massachusetts that actually lend out or will bring adaptive bikes to any training session. And so, Susan, we will get back to you, and we're going to email you a link or two. Oh, sorry, it was Jen. Sorry, the questions are coming in. Jen, we're going to email you some links to some of the organizations that we've captured that do that. So, great question. Susan, an equity issue on our community is that parents and staff cannot get to school via public transit. We would like to move, let's see here. We would like, this is a long question. Hold on, let's see if I can read it. We would like to move the $4.1 million spent on school bus transportation that some or all can be used for public transit. This would help grandparents wanting to pick up kids from schools but lack transit access in rural and suburban communities. With limited or no public transportation, it would increase equity to use funds limited to only students for other populations and would truly help our most vulnerable. So, Susan, I don't know if I'm trying to see if I'm answering the question in here, but I think it's interesting that you're looking at the school bus funds as part of giving the general population more access to public transit. I think that's really interesting, and I'm not sure what community you're in, but we will certainly reach out afterwards and talk about some maybe things that our program can do to help and to understand what's going on within your community. So thanks for bringing that up. I think that's really interesting. Okay, good questions. Any other questions coming up in the chat? And again, you can also shoot me an email, and we are going to send out an evaluation. We have one more coming in, but I will say we will send out an evaluation for this webinar when we are done. At some point today, please expect that. We do review your comments and really appreciate any feedback that you can give on the topics. So Ray asks, can you explain how community engagement differs at the school versus at the community level? We're going to have Vivian take this, our community engagement expert.
Well, I don't know if they're much different, to be honest. I know that there is a school in the neighborhood in which I live. They do a lot of the public meetings related to transportation in that school. And a lot of the participants there are parents that are within that school. So the language is the same when it comes to transportation. It doesn't differ. I almost think that it would be easier to do community engagement to outreach within the schools than it would be the general population in the neighborhood. But engagement is engagement, having folks be there, making sure that we are making it as equitable as possible and fair, and that the process, again, isn't a cookie cutter process, and we are able to specialize it to the needs of that community. I think that would work.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read a question from Todd. To all, Medford is interested in inquiring about partnering with neighboring communities for a possible community-type shuttle for all, but specifically to help vulnerable populations, including students, elderly, etc. as a supplementary service to existing MBTA service. That's fantastic. We've heard about other communities doing that as well. So, let's see. Sorry, I'm getting all these questions coming in. So if anyone is in a surrounding community to Medford, we definitely want you to reach out to, look in the chat window to Todd, who is interested in starting that. And then Emily, you said we didn't catch one of the questions above.
Yes, so one of the questions was, has MassDOT allowed or approved Cambridge's 20 miles per hour speed limit? The MassDOT speed limit process is typically a limiting factor in municipalities' ability to lower speeds on all side streets. I'm not sure about that. I would recommend reaching out to the City of Cambridge's city planner or town engineer, or I don't know, I'm not sure about that, but it's a good question, and it is something that we have heard in the past.
Was that the Todd?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then along the lines of the above question, do you know examples where buses used for schools are allocated to a fixed route service for the public transit during the middle of the day? We personally here are not aware of that, but we do have all of our outreach coordinators on the call. And if any of them are aware of it, we will get back to you and let you know. But for those of us here in the room, none of us we're all shaking our heads saying, no, we're not aware of that happening. So Vivian would also like a copy of her glossary of terms used at public meetings. That has been requested several times, so we will work on getting that out. And then I'd love to have MassDOT SRTS have a listserv for all the types, for all of us in local safe routes groups in Massachusetts, so that we can be resources for each other. That's a wonderful idea, and we will absolutely look into it. I think it's a fantastic suggestion. There is a national Safe Routes to School listserv, which we will sometimes see local postings from Massachusetts and also from other neighboring states, and we love to get information from, from our fellow New England states as well. So we will certainly look into to doing that. As a supplement to that, right now we do have our e-blasts that we send out. So make sure that you are on our email list so that you get all of our up-to-date information. And let's see here. Oh, Johnny just posted something about Cambridge, so you can take a look at that link. And then Beth asks, will the slides from today be shared? Yes, they will. They will be shared as a recorded webinar. So once we stop this webinar, it will be captioned. We always do captioning as part of our equity check. So the webinar will be captioned and available online at the Safe Routes to School website, which is on mass.gov, and that should be available within the next few weeks. And we have about 2 minutes left, but we promise over the next several days that we will get back to everyone who posted a question here that we couldn't quite get an answer to, and we certainly appreciate all of the great questions and you taking the time to spend an hour with us. And could you send out a PDF of the slides? Yes, what we will do is when we send out the evaluation, let's see if we can get a PDF going. I'm always hesitant to do that without the context of the speaker notes. So that's why we usually like to post the full webinar with all of the talking points. But we will check and see if we can make that available. Okay. So everyone's saying they want a glossary and they want the slides. All right. So we have a consensus and we have some work to do. So thank you all again, and have a great rest of your week. And please look out for that email, the follow-up email with the evaluation and some of the attachments. Thank you so much. Have a great day.